Okay, vino Madonino Hino Aleno Masea Denu Cornena Lena Masea Denu Cornel. Okay, I'd like to dedicate the shir tonight to Nishmat Harav Agon Adin Evan Yisrael Steinzelt Zichon Tzaddik Livracha Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Harav Yaakov Tzvi Ben Liba Ruach Zichon Tzaddik Livracha Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Harav Aaron Vulcan Zichon Tzaddik Livracha Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Avi Omori V'Artet Roshi Tzvi Hirsch Ben Mordechai Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Hami Omori V'Artet Roshi Eliezer Ben Yishayahu David Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Haim Shmuel Yaakov Ben Aryalev. The Gam David Ben Yamin Ben Moshe Yaakov. The Gam Shemaya Ben Adina. The Gam Yitzchak Ben Alizah. The Gam Yitzchak Ben Miriam. The Gam Harab Yehuda Ben Rivka Leah. Ruach Adonai Tenechenu Began Eden. The Gam Hatun Hana Bat Mazal Miriam. Ruth Bat Rachel. וגם מאירה בת חיים, זינה בת שורה, וגם חנה רחל בת בנימין יהודה, וגם רחל בת לאה, וגם רחל בת אסתר. רוח אדוני תניחן בגן עדן, להבדיל בין המתים לחיים רפואה שלמה ואליהו בן שרה, ושמעון משה בן עדינה, ויהושע בן משה, וחיים שנו זלמן יהודה בן הינדה יוכבד, ודת זב בן לאה, ומשה בן בוואי. אל נרפן עליהם, אל נרפן עליהם, אל נרפן עליהם. Also the Shema for Ruth bat Sarah, for Malsu bat Fortuna, for Esther Pero bat Chana Devorah, for Chava Miriam bat Bunyareza, and Chaya Miriam bat Esther. El Narafan Alehen, El Narafan Alehen, El Narafan Alehen, and may all the people affected by the coronavirus, may they have a complete and speedy recovery, or any other illnesses, have a complete and speedy recovery in the Zchut of the Torah we're going to learn tonight. El Narafan Alehem, El Narafan Alehem, El Narafan Alehem. Okay, so I just want to review in the end of the Hakdama of the Talmud Eser HaSefirot and the derech of the limud that Rav Ashlag is suggesting. So we had spent about 10 classes on the Hakdama, on the introduction to this book. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with the book itself. But at the end over here, in the last page, page Mem Daled, it says over here, Sed Halimud. He's giving us an advice of how one has to learn this material. And he says over here, Lemad techila tepanim. First, learn the face, learn the outer part, which is the parts on the top of the pages, as we'll see. Dehainu divrei Arizal. That is the words of the Arizal. Hamud pasim b'rashi ha'amudim ad sof haSefer. That are basically printed on the top of the pages until the end of the book. Ve'afa pi shelo tavin. And even though it's highly likely that you may not understand, chazor alehem kama pa'amim. Review them multiple times. Al dat, according to what it says, mitehila lemigmar v'hada lemisbar. First to read and then to understand. First to learn and then to understand. So we see there's an aspect of just reading the information, getting the details in there, but not necessarily understanding what the nimshal is. Of course, there's the mashal and the nimshal, as all the Kabbalah is. There's the mashal, there's the parable, and then there's the nimshal, which is what it means. So he says, first try to just get the mashal down. And then once the person has the mashal down, then you can go and learn the nimshal. Achareze, after this, lamada tabiu or a panimi. And then afterwards, learn the explanation or panimi, which is going to explain a little bit about the nimshal that he's talking about. Vishtadel, and make efforts with it. Beofen shutuchal lemod lavin hetevet hapanim, so that therefore, when a person is going to go through the or panimi, when a person is going to go through the bottom part, that he has an increased understanding of what was written on the top. Okay, continue on. Gambli Ezrata Bi'ur, to the point where once he's moving along well, he's going to be able to understand the top part even without the explanation on the bottom. Halavai, we should get there. And after that, look at the Bi'ur, the explanation. It's called Histaklut Pinimit, which is a more deeper understanding of the material. Until you understand it and you remember everything. And after you've gone through all of that material, then you should attempt. He's got questions in the back of the chelek. Try to answer the questions. After you've answered the questions, look at the answer for that very question to make sure that you had the right answer. And you should do this for each question one at a time. And you shall learn, and you shall repeat, and you should have chazara. Alehem kama pa'amim, multiple times, ashet tiskarem hetev kimunachim b'kusa, until a person has a working knowledge of the information and it's if it's like it's in the box. And this is very, very important because as you go on and on in the limud, as you go on and on in the book, if one person, God forbid, begins to forget what he learned previously, it can come to all kinds of difficulties in understanding, as the rabbi is going to say now. Because with every word, there's a precision here with every word. Shebechelek hashlishi, which is in the third chelek. We're going to be in the first chelek. In the third chelek, a person has to really understand all of the details of the first two chalakim. The first chelek, we'll do a piece of it today, and we'll continue on for the next couple of weeks. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll be able to get to the second chelek in due time. When we get to the third chelek, it's going to be very important that the first and second chalakim are very well in the person's hand. Af muvan katan lo yichsar, and even one small iota of understanding a person can't be missing. V'hagarua mikolhu, and the worst thing possible, she'ma'ayen lo yargish klal ma sheshachach, that the person when he's learning is not even going to understand, not even going to remember what he forgot. Ella, or the things will not be clear in his eyes, or he's going to make a mistake in the understanding of the material because he didn't properly understand the introduction. He didn't properly understand the first two chalakim. Mehamat hashicha, because of the forgetfulness. And that's why it's so important. The rabbi is saying a person has to review this material more than once. Uchmuvan, and if that's understood, shetaut ahat goreret achareh eser ta'ayot. One mistake will cause 10 mistakes afterwards. Until a person comes to the point where he doesn't understand anything that's going on, and then God forbid he's going to come to a situation where he's not going to continue learning this material and he's going to put it down because he's going to feel that he can't learn it at all. So the rabbi is giving some advice of how a person can make sure that he has a proper understanding and learns this material well. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. So this way, if you don't have the sources in front of you, it's there. Okay? So, first of all, let's just look at the book itself. This is Chelek Rishon, the first Chelek, and this is the Simsum V'Kav Kolel Bet Prakim. The Simsum, of course, is the concealment or the contraction. We have discussed this before in previous classes. The Kav is the line, which we will talk about. Kolel Bet Prakim is basically there are two prakim, there are two chapters in the first Chelek. So there's a chapter 1, there's a chapter 2, both of those in the first Chelek. And when he's talking about the top part, this is the introduction over here to the top part. And then this is what he's talking about, is the part that's from the Arizal here. And what we're going to do, Bli Neder, is we're going to read through this part without reading the bottom part at all. We're just going to go through this top part here. Now we're going to discuss terms that are going to have a mashal. They're going to be a parable. We can't make the mistake in any way thinking that there's any physicality whatsoever in the Shamayim. If a person is going to think that way, it's better that he not learn this material at all. A person has to recognize that everything we're going to learn, even though there's going to be terms here that are going to be physical terms, there is absolutely nothing physical in the spiritual world. And we're using physical terms, l'saberet ha'ozen, basically to allow the ear or the human mind to be able to understand these very, very spiritual concepts. And that's why it's very important to recognize that everything we're going to discuss over here is a mashal. It is not the actual material the way it is. It's a mashal for what's going on in the Shamayim. And we have to understand the Nimshal, but we're not going to get to the Nimshal until we finish going through all the mashal. Does everybody understand what we just said?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, very good. All right, so let's go and let's see if we can get someplace Be'ezrat Hashem. Meva'er inyan Simsum. He's going to explain the concept of the Simsum. Ha'echad, the first part, Shenin Stamtsem Or En Sof Baruch Hashem, that the Or En Sof, which is the unlimited Or, and again, when we say Or, we're not talking about light. We're talking about Or is a mashal. Once again, I'll try to keep reminding us over and over and over again that these terms that we're using of Or, light, and things like that, these are mishalim. There's no light in the spiritual world. There's no actual light. We know from physics that light has a particular and a wave form. Light is an energy and a particle. At the end of the day, there is no energy, there is no particles in the Shamayim. This is spiritual. And when we say Shamayim, we're not talking about the heaven. We're not talking about what's in the atmosphere. When we say Shamayim, we're talking about the heavenly worlds. And these worlds have no physicality whatsoever. So we're going to use physical terms like or, like Simsum. These are physical terms that are going to help us to understand deeper spiritual concepts. So the idea of the Simsum, which is a concealment or a contraction of the Or Ein Sof, of the unlimited light of the Ein Sof. Ein Sof means without end. Baruch Hashem. And the reason why we say Baruch Hashem is because Ein Sof is basically has the same characteristics completely as Hashem in B'chvodov Atzmo. But we have to recognize that nothing in the Kabbalah is ever talking about the Atzmut of God. Nothing is talking about the actual being God, because there is nothing that human beings can understand whatsoever about the being God. We have a concept of God has an infinite amount of names, and the reason why there's an infinite amount of names is because a name causes a limitation to something, and we're talking about a being that has absolutely no limit whatsoever. So therefore there's no terminology, there's no human being, there's no angel that can understand or even begin to comprehend the essence, the mahut, as we say in Hebrew, of Hashem. All we can talk about regarding Hashem is how God interacts with the world. And this interaction with the world, of course, this is before the world is created, yes, but the Ein Sof is this aspect of interacting with others, even though at this point there is nothing else other than God. Continue on. Does everybody understand that? If I get anywhere where a person doesn't understand, please stop me and ask a question. If it's an appropriate question for me to answer, I will. If it's not, I'll say we'll answer it later. Does everybody understand what we just said?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Let's continue on. So the Tzimtzum is basically a concealment or a contraction of the Or Ein Sof, of this unlimited, shall we say, or without end, this light, again, parable, light without end, without border. Bichdei lehatzil hane'etzalim, for the purpose of to emanate the emanations. Now the terminology the rabbi is using here is very, very precise, because the first one of the four worlds is called Atsilut. The word Atsilut comes from the word Etzel, which basically means near, the closest world. And the Atsilut actually is godly, which we will talk about, okay? This is not a created world. There is no creation that happens unto the world of the Bria. The concept of creation is yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. The Atsilut is ayin. It's nothing, which means it's not nothing. It's everything. It's really it's the world of godliness, and that's why using the term of Atsilut, almost like a lamp, a candle, it gives off light. And this is the concept of emanation, that light emanates from its source. So the lehatzil hane'etzalim is to emanate the emanations, v'livro hanivraim. This is the beginning of what we call Maaseh Breshit. The beginning part is Maaseh Merkava, and Livro HaNivraim is Maaseh Breshit. The building, the creating of the world, which begins with the world of the Bria. And of course, there are four worlds for those who have paid attention or attended classes previously. There's the Atsilut, which is the world of the emanation, which is godly. And that world basically is in the godly realm. And then there are three created worlds: the Bria, the Yetzirah, and the Asiyah. Bria, which is basically yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. The Yetzirah is called the world of formation, which is yesh me'yesh. And the Asiyah is the world that we're in right now. The actual physical world that we live in is called the world of the Asiyah, where human beings are put in order to do things, in order to do Avodat Hashem. And this is basically the aspects of the initial world, which is the world of the Atsilut. And And then the three worlds that are after that world, which are the Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Asiyah, of course, being our world where we're living physically right now. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, continuing on. Aleph. Lifnei hatzimtzum, before the concealment or the contraction. We'll see when we learn this in a little more detail why I'm using both of those terms. Haya ensof memale kol hamitziut. The ensof, which means the or ensof, the light of the ensof, was memale, was filling all of reality. Now, of course, when we use the term filling, we're not talking about filling from a physical point of view. We're talking about filling from a spiritual point of view. Kol hamitziut, all of reality, which means there was only one reality, and that was the reality of Hashem. That was before the Simsum, which means there was only that reality, or the reality of the Ein Sof, shall we say. Continuing on, Bet. Sibat habriya, the cause. When you say the word siba, we're talking about cause, and then there's an effect. The siba is the cause. The sibat habriya, the cause of the creation, hayta kedei legalot shemotav v'kinuyav. So here, the rabbi is explaining the purpose of the creation of the world. The purpose of the creation of the world, the cause of the Bria, which is the creation, which includes the worlds of the Bria, the Yetzirah, and the Asiyah, which we've already discussed, was so that to reveal, legalot, to uncover, to discover, Shemotav v'kinuyav, his names, the names of Hashem, and kinuyav, and his nicknames. Anyone who's been who's coming and joining our class on Monday night in Sha'arei Orah, will understand exactly what we're talking about, Shemotav v'kinuyav, names and nicknames. I can't go into more detail about that now. If there's any further information you'd like, I can certainly send you, though I think we're up to class number 40 in the Sha'arei Orah as currently. Anybody have any questions of what we've discussed so far? Okay. Gimel. Simsum ha'or misvivot nekuda ha'emtza'it. So he's going to break it up into different parts here, like he's talking about the rabbi here. The tzimtzum, the concealment or the contraction of the or of the Ein Sof, misvivot nekuda emtza'it, which means the contraction kavyachol began in a middle point. Now it's very hard to understand how could there be a middle point of something that is unlimited. Let's leave that alone for now. Next, Daled. Hachalal hashenishar achar hatzimtzum haya agol. Chalal, for lack of a better term, is space, an empty space. But we are not talking about a physical space. We are talking about a spiritual type of space. So once again, this is a mashal. We need to understand the mashal, but there's a nimshal here. And we will discuss this when we go into more detail. Hachalal, which means when there was this concealment or contraction of the unlimited or of Ein Sof, it left a space, kavyachol, that was left over. And since the concealment began from a central point and went out, therefore that is in the shape of agol. Agol is a sphere or a circle, but a three-dimensional circle, of course, is a sphere. There's no dimensions here. This is from a spiritual point of view, so there's no actual dimensions. Agol is a circle. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Hey. Lefi she'or ein sof hu behashva'a. Now, once again, if everybody understands the properties of a physical circle, you understand that at any point in the circle, let's say on the end of, the border of the circle is equidistant from the center. No matter where you are in that circle, it's an equidistance on the outside of the circle. And if you can imagine that a circle has multiple rings on the inside that make up the circle, each ring is equidistant no matter where you are along that ring from the center. That's the definition of a circle. So he says over here, Lefi or Ein Sof hu behashva'a, because the or Ein Sof is equal everywhere. Haya tzimtzum gam ken behashva'a shu sod ha'agol. And since the or Ein Sof is pashut, which basically means it's equal everywhere, which means it's infinite everywhere. So therefore the contraction happened in an equal amount everywhere, and that's why it's kavyachol making the shape, spiritual shape, of a circle. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, let's continue on. Lifnei hatzimtzum haya ensof memale kol hametziut. So this is the first aleph that he said over here. So now he's going to describe this in more detail. All of this is from the Lashon of the Arizal. Nothing here is from the language of the rabbi, of the author of this book. The author of this book is only basically putting the different items that the Arizal wrote in the Etz Chaim and other places, and he's organizing it together for us in these headings on top. And then the rabbi, when we get to it, is going to explain them on the bottom. But we're not going to get to the bottom today. We're only going to do the top. Da. The word da means intimately know. Knowledge in Hebrew is da, which is a connection. Vayeda Adam et Chava ishto. It's a connection. This is the purpose. The purpose is to connect. And how do we connect to Hashem? We connect to Hashem through this limud. Obviously, a person connect to Hashem through doing Torah, mitzvot, and ma'asim tovim. But the deepest connection that one can have with Hashem is through the study of the Kabbalah. Da. Ki terem shene'etzalu ha'ne'etzalim v'nivra'u ha'nivraim. The word terem in Hebrew means immediately before. Now, how can you be talking about immediately before when time is not yet created? Yes, because we understand that time is a creation that is in the Bria. In the Atsilut, there is no time. That we're going to leave that alone for now. Suffice it to say the word terem is basically saying before. And how do you understand the before when there's ecstasy? But we'll leave that alone for now. Before the emanations were emanated, and before the creations were created, once again, the world of the Atsilut and the world of the Bria, Haya Or Elyon Pashut. There was a exalted or, a godly or, shall we say. Once again, not physical light, spiritual light. Pashut. The word pashut has multiple meanings. One meaning of the word pashut is simple, but that's not really what it means here. Pashut means it was everywhere. It was everywhere within reality. And he said this previously. He said that before there was the Simsum, what does he say? Haya ensof memale kol hametziut. That's another way of saying memale kol hametziut is saying the or was pashut. It was pashut, which means it was everywhere. Memale kol hametziut, filling the entire reality, all that was, or that is. Anybody have any questions so far?
So, the space was already created or no?
Say that again?
Was the space, the concept of space, was it already created?
I don't understand the question.
You said the or was all over basically, right?
Through the contraction of the or the hiding or the concealment of the or, what was made was a space, a halal.
I see.
Okay, but we're not talking about a physical space. Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Okay. So
now this is before the creation of the world.
This is before anything. This is the, shall we say, the preparation for the creation of the world.
Okay.
If you want to give an analogy, it's not a great analogy. It's sort of like the thought that goes into the action. So if you want to pick something up with your hand, the first thing that happens, terem, there is any action, that there is thought that's going to say in your mind, I'm going to pick up that action. And then there's a signal sent from the brain that goes to the arm and tells the nerves in the arm and the muscles to extend and pick up that item. Okay? So we're already talking about here the thought, and hard to say thought because Hashem is one, yes, but there's no separation between thought and action vis-a-vis God. Thought and action are exactly the same thing, unlike in human beings where thought and action are two separate things. That's not the same factor. That's why this analogy is not perfect. But nevertheless, the same thing. But before a person extends his hand out to do any action, there is thought involved beforehand. What we're describing over here is kavyachol, the thoughts or the potential before the action. Okay? All right. Continuing on above in the big words. V'lo haya shum makom panui. And there was no empty space. Okay? Again, he's using a term makom panui, empty space, because what did we say previously? If we're continuing on in the mashal, the or of the Ein Sof was mimale kol ha-mitziut. So within the entire mitziut, within the entire reality, there was no place that was panui, or for lack of a better term, vacant of that or. Bivchinat, next page, page bet, avir rekani v'chalal, in an aspect of empty air and space. Now, once again, we are using physical terms to denote high spiritual items. We will understand the nimshal when we do it on the bottom. But first, let's understand the mashal. Yes?
I know I've missed a few of these classes, but I'm just wondering if, like, what you're referring to about the spiritual or, so that means that basically Hashem created a non-spiritual environment for us to dwell in, because before everything was spiritual. Does that make sense, or that's not what we're really talking about?
Yeah, not really.
Okay. All right, fine.
Before there was...
Everything before had the spiritual or, and now not everything may have that, right? Like the world is not as
we're not even anywhere near what we would call the worlds that the impurities, shall we say? Okay, that's not until very far into the creative process. Okay, everything we're talking about here is of the utmost spirituality. Even when he's talking about avir rekani, this empty space, this is holiness. This is not a negative. It's the root, shall we say, of evil. But it's not evil. There's no evil here. Okay?
Okay.
As we say in the pasuk, lo yugurecha kol ra. With Hashem there is no ra. The ra is only a factor much, much later on in the process of creation. But the root of it is what we're talking about here, but I don't want to go any further in that at all. Suffice it to say, when you have an infinite reality, which is, of course, the Or Ein Sof, in order for there to be finite beings, which the goal of everything we're discussing here is for the creation of man, yes? Man being a finite being living in a finite world. It's almost like Kavyachol, God had to shut the lights off a little bit so the small candle that is man can have any reality whatsoever and not be overwhelmed by the infinite reality of Hashem.
Right. Okay. That's what I was trying to say. Yes.
Okay, and that's where we're here now. We're here now to understand that in order for us to have any type of function or reality, Kavyachol, Hashem had to conceal. We'll learn that God is everywhere. As you learned when you were a little girl in the school, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, yes? There is no place that Hashem is not there. That's why I use the term concealment as opposed to contraction, because both of them have a value to them. Concealment means hidden, but not absent.
Right. Thank you for explaining.
Okay. Avir rekani v'chalal. So this is an empty air, and this is not air. Okay. V'chalal, and space. This is not physical space. And this is before. So there was no avir rekani. There was no halal, because we said the Or Ein Sof was mimale kol ha-mitziut, was filling all of the creation that was called pashut, which means spread out everywhere in existence. spiritual existence. There is nothing physical at all at this point, zero. Okay? Continuing on. Because this is the world, this is before the Bria, and the Bria is where the physical world is created, which is where the Torah picks off. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. That's the beginning. That's discussing the creation of the physical world. Contained within those pisukim are hints and remez and all kinds of suggestions of the spiritual worlds. Okay, but nevertheless, the physical world is not even yet. We're not even there. Okay. Continue on. Ella haya hakol memule min or ein sof pashutahu. He's repeating himself. You're going to see in this limud, there's a lot of repetition. And the reason for that is when you're talking about things that making mistakes in these issues can be very, very dangerous spiritually, it's very important that there be repetition, which is called shinun. So the person doesn't make a mistake and think something wrong. So now this is almost like Ella haya hakol, everything, hakol, everything, memule min or ein sof, filled with the or of Ein Sof. All of reality was filled with the or Ein Sof, right? Pashutahu, which was pashut, which was spread out everywhere. Velo haya lo bechinat rosh, lo bechinat sof. And that or had no aspect of rosh, which is beginning, lo bechinat sof, and had no aspect of end. That's what Ein Sof is. Ein Sof is there is no end. It's not even talking about the Rosh. Of course, there's no Rosh, which means there's no beginning and there's no end. And if you think about a circle, and that's the reason the analogy is being used by a circle doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. Continuing on. Ela hakol haya or echad pashut. Everything was one light, one simple, which means the light is the same everywhere. Pashut, spread everywhere. Shaveh behashva'a echad, and equal everywhere, which means it was equally touching all of reality. It was equally exposed in all of reality. Vehu hanikra or Ein Sof. And that is what is called or Ein Sof, the or without end, or the infinite light, shall we say. Any questions of what we've discussed so far? Okay, now we're going to get to the second portion of what the rabbis discussed in the introduction. Sibat habriya hayta kedei legalot shemotav v'kinuyav. The cause for the creation was to reveal his names and his nicknames. Let's look at this. Bet. V'ka'asher ala birtzono hapashut. When it rose in his ratzon, in his will, in the will of Hashem, in the will of the pashut, which basically means spread out, because once again, there's nothing about the Hashem that is not spread out everywhere. Okay? And we're talking about ritzono. This is the ratzon of Hashem. And this is very, very careful. The term used here is ratzon. Okay? Ratzon is will. Okay? Not need. There is no need. Because if you say there's need, there's something missing that is filled when that need is there. That's why the language used is ratzon. Ratzon is will. Hashem has a will. And that will was for what we're going to talk about now. And it says, Allah birtzono. This is like the same term of terem. It sort of appeared. But how can that be? We're talking about a being that has no time, yes? We'll leave that alone for now. Livro ha'olamot ulaha'atzil ha'ne'etzalim. To create the world, ulaha'atzil ha'ne'etzalim. And to emanate the emanations. He's reversing the order here because the Atsilut comes before the Bria of the Olamot. The Atsilut is first and then the Bria. He's reversing the order. We'll leave that alone for now. Lotzi la'or shlemut pe'ulotav ushmotav v'kinuyav. And the purpose of the creation of the worlds and the emanation of the emanation of the emanations is what? Lehotzi, to bring out, leor shlemut peulotav, to bring out, to reveal, to the light, to bring to the light, shall we say, or to bring out the perfection of his actions and his names and his nicknames. Asher zot haya sibat briat ha'olamot. And that was precisely the purpose, the reason for the creation of the world. So what we've just read over here is the purpose of the creation of all the worlds, which means everything that is created in the universe, the entire physical universe, obviously is created for mankind, and all the things, the angels and all these things we're talking about here, these are all creations. All of things is created for this very purpose. Lehotzi la'or, to reveal it out, the shlemut, the perfection of his actions and his names and his nicknames. Now, of course, we can understand if there's going to be a revealing of something, before something is revealed, it has to be hidden. If you think about the afikoman on Pesach, what is the afikoman? We take the matzah, yachatz, we break the matzah, and then the matzah is hidden so that later on it can be found. The concept of the Simsum is introducing this idea that first is a concealment for the purposes of a revelation. Now, that doesn't mean the entire purpose of the Simsum is just for revelation. That's an aspect of it, but that's what he's saying here. Everybody understand that? Baruch Hashem. Okay. We're going to go to page Daled now. Simsum ha'or misvivot nekuda ha'emtza'it. What he said previously was the concealment or the contraction of the or was around a central point. Gimel. Vine az, once again the word az, then, implying time, which we're going to leave that alone for now. Vihine az tzimtzemet atzmo ein sof. He caused there to be a tzimtzum, a concealment or a contraction of the or of Ein Sof, b'nikudah ha'emtza'it, in the central point. How there could be a central point for infinity, we're going to leave that alone for now. Asher bo, continuing on in the next page, hey, of Av, ba'emtza mamash, in the very center, v'tzimtzem ha'orahu, and he concealed or contracted that light, v'nitrachek el tzadeh sevivot ha'nekudah ha'emtza'it, and it separated or it distanced itself, which means this the shall we say the concealment was equidistant from that central point in all directions, and that's how we get there to be a goal, a circle or a sphere. Any questions on that?
No question, but quick question about the matzah. Any relationship why matzah is also round?
That's custom. That doesn't have to be round. That's the custom. Drosh v'kabel sachar. When a person's going to go through this limud, you're going to understand that there's a lot of things that we do, and there's reasons for what we do. There are open reasons and there are hidden reasons. And the more a person studies this type of limud from this book and from Sha'arei Orah, you're going to realize that everything we're doing is basically reflecting all of the principles that we're discussing here. Okay? Okay. Now we're in the next part. Hachalal shenishar achar hatzimtzum haya agol. The space, once again, not physical space, spiritual space, sublime concept, that was left after the contraction was agol, was in the shape of a circle. Again, not shape. The shape is physical. We're talking from a spiritual point of view. The az nishar. And then what was left? Makom panui. So in the previous section, he described the concept of the tzimtzum, which began at a central point and extended equidistant in all directions. And from that central point, of course, the circle has an infinite amount of points, yes? So it extended infinitely in all directions to a certain limit. If it was unlimited, then there's no circle. So it's a limitation of that Simsum. It's almost like a limitation of a limitation, which is a positive, but we'll leave that alone for now. Ve'az nishar makom panui, and then there was a empty space, once again, physical, not physical, spiritual. Ve'avir, and air, once again, this is a spiritual concept, not a physical concept. Ve'chalal rekani, and an empty space, once again, physical, not spiritual, yes. Minikuda ha'emtzait mamash, from that central point exactly. V'neh hatzimtzum hazeh, and this concealment or contraction, haya behashva'a echad b'svivot ha'nekuda ha'emtzait, was equal in all around, which means equal in all around. That's why it's in the shape of a circle. From that middle point, rekanitahi, from that emptiness, be'ofed shibmakom ha'chalal hahu, so that the space of that chalal, the space of that empty space, haya agol, was a circle, mikol svivotav, from all of its directions. Continuing on, behashva'a gemura, everything exactly equal. V'lo haya b'tmunat meruba ba'al zavit netzevet. And there was no, in this imagery we're talking about here, in this mashal, there is no square, miruba is a square, and there is no corner. Because once there's a corner, the corner is further from the sides. That cannot be. It's a circle. Lefi shegam ensof tzimtzem atzmo b'vchinat agol. And that's because the ensof, just like there was this spread out, shall we say, of this concealment, while there was this concealment, there was also the Ein Sof extended out. So that it's like two things happening at the same time. It's like the or of the Ein Sof spread from the middle, creating or making this halal, and the halal spread out from the center, kavyachol, pushing the or of the Ein Sof out to those sides. Behashva'a echad mikol sedadim, with equal in all directions, and that's the definition of what a circle is in geometry. Any questions on that? All of what we're discussing here has very, very, very deep meanings, and unfortunately we're not going to get to those deep meanings tonight, but it's very, very important that we understand the mashal, as the rabbi said in the introduction. Okay, we're on page Chet, and we're on part number Hey. Lefi she'or ein sof hu behashva, because the or ein sof is equal everywhere. Haya simsum ganken behashva shu soda hagol. The simsum was also equal. Okay, it was equally contracted or equally concealed from that center point in all directions, and this is the secret of the agol, of the circle. The siba haita, and the reason was, or the cause was, lefi shekevan sheor ha'en sof shaveh behashva gmura, because the or ein sof is shaveh, is equal in all ways, in every aspect. Huchrach gamken. This is what caused. This is why it has to happen, because you can't say there's more aspects of light in one place versus another, because we're talking about echad. We're talking about a being that is unity, and unity requires everything to be equal. Continuing on. Shitzamtzem atzmo behashva'a echad mikol hatzedadim, that this or ein sof concealed or contracted itself in an equal way from all of the sides. Here we're not talking sides, because sides is implying a square or a triangle, from all different aspects, shall we say. And not that there was a greater tzimtzum on one side versus the other side, because then that would not be hashva'a. It could still potentially be an agol, a circle, but we would not be equal in everywhere. And that is not how it happened. V'noda b'chokhmat ha'shi'ur, and we know chokhmat ha'shi'ur is actually geometry. She'en tmuna kol kach shaveh k'mo tmunat ha'igol, and we know that out of all the geometric shapes that exist, there is nothing that has more equality with it than the circle. Ma she'en ken mitmunat meruba ba'al zavit natzevet boletet. And this is not the case of a square when there's a corner that is sticking out. V'chen tmunat hameshulash, and now he's talking about a triangle. Because a triangle also has corners, which means in the corner, the actual corner is further than the other places. This is not. It has to be agol, which is equally in all directions. And that's why we understand that the Simsum had to be because of this requirement of hashva'ah, of equality everywhere. That Simsum had to be in the shape, spiritual shape, of a goal, of a circle. Any questions of what we discussed so far? Okay, I know we're a little earlier. We've only been 45 minutes, but I'm going to stop here. I think, first I just want to ask if anybody has any questions of what we discussed so far. Okay, I think it's very important to review what we've discussed tonight, to listen to this again and have the book in front of you. And as the rabbi said, to make sure that you understand each one of those 5 items that he brought up from the beginning and how he explained them at the end. Just understand the mashal. Don't guess what the nimshal is. Don't read the bottom. Just focus on the top part, what he's discussed so far, and make sure you understand all of the Hebrew terminology that is there. And if you have to, on the sheets over there, if you want to put a little notation over there, I suggest you actually buy the book, but that's a separate issue. You want to make sure you get the actual definitions of these terms so you have an understanding of what he's discussed. Be'ezrat Hashem, next week we're going to do Perek Bet, where we're going to discuss the next aspects of this. And then from there, hopefully we're going to come back and we're going to begin to understand the bottom, what he's discussed on the bottom, in more detail. With regarding the first 10 shiurim, I have to still publish the last one. I will take care of that, Be'ezrat Hashem, the next couple of days. That was the Hakdama. Technically, they're not necessary. It's always good to learn the introduction to a book to understand why the rabbi wrote the book. And anybody who participated in those 10 shiurim that we did, it was amazing the kind of things that were discussed there. It's not required for what we're learning right now. It will be required when we go further on. But so you don't have to worry if you haven't listened to all those 10 in the introduction beforehand. But it's very important from this point on. If you miss a class, you have to listen to the class before you go to the next one, and make sure you understand the material well. Okay? Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.
Thank you.